All right, we want to, before we get to coverage of the March Against Our Rights, Saturday, in Little Rock and in Washington, D.C., we want to go to the News Radio 102.9 KARN Newsmaker line and welcome our old friend Bruce Westerman, who represents the 4th District of Arkansas, South Arkansas, West Arkansas, and a good little chunk of northwestern Arkansas in the United States House of Representatives. And we welcome Representative Westerman to the program in the vain hope that he may be able to help us reinstill some sense of decorum to today's proceedings. Sir, how are you?
Hey, Doc. Good to be with you. I'm calling you from over in western Arkansas. I've been in Ozark this morning and out in the district today, so it's good to be able to stop and take a minute to visit.
Excellent. Well, look, I want to thank you for being the lone voice crying in the wilderness among our U.S. representatives from Arkansas voting against that monstrous spending bill, that $1.3 trillion mess last week. But before we get to that, maybe we can talk about a little bit of good news. You had a lot to do with the tax cut bill that the president signed here recently. Tell us about that and how that's affecting the paychecks of people in Arkansas.
Yeah, well, especially in the 4th District, people are seeing more money on their paycheck, and that's really going to be a good piece of policy for a lot of America, but especially in my district, Doc, where I think 90 to 95% of the people will use the standard deduction and take the higher child tax credits. I was with a company over in western Arkansas this morning, Black Hills Energy. They're a energy company, and they were telling me that they're back with the Public Service Commission looking at how much they'll be lowering their rates to their customers, which is kind of an added benefit. We've already seen Entergy do that because of the tax breaks that they got. Plus, they were going to add about 30 new positions and invest a lot more capital into their infrastructure. So we're seeing positive outcomes of that tax bill, and I think we'll continue to see even more as we move forward. So that's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime your energy rates come down, anytime you have more left in your paycheck, on payday, that's a really good thing. Now, a lot of folks don't realize, I guess, that there's a lot of negotiating and horse trading going on in Congress with most bills that get passed. You had something to do with keeping the historic tax credits in the tax bill that got passed?
Yeah, there was the House version took the tax credits out, and I've worked hard with Ways and Means Committee and with leadership saying I had to have some assurances that we were going to get those back from the Senate. And they assured me that they were working with the Senate on it. But when the bill went to the Senate, I drafted a letter and got a lot of co-signers on the letter. And plus, for any of your listeners that may not know about the historic tax credit, it's something that Reagan put into place. And thank the Gipper for making a video talking about how good historic tax credits were. And, for every dollar that's spent in a tax credit, it returns about $1.20 of revenue to the federal government, and at the same time, it preserves some of our old historic buildings and creates more economic growth around it. So it was one of those things that wasn't broken, and we didn't really need to fix it, and I was able to advocate for that and make sure we got it back in the final bill before passage.
Okay, so let me ask you about that, because obviously when I hear the term historic tax credit, I didn't realize it could be taken more than one way. In other words, these are tax credits for folks who want to revitalize an historic district in downtown in a city or town in small town America, including Arkansas.
Yeah, and it's used a lot in my hometown of Hot Springs, Texarkana, Pine Bluff, El Dorado in my district and other areas, but it's used across the state and across the country. And if you've got a building in a historic district, there are certain requirements on how you can modify that building, and it makes the cost go up. So the historic tax credit program was put in place to give those investors a a 20% tax credit on however much they spent to restore one of these buildings. Now, what they end up doing is selling that tax credit for about 80 cents on the dollar, so they end up getting about a 16% credit. But by getting that tax credit, they've invested a lot of money back into these historic districts, which are good for tourism. You know, one that's currently under construction is the Arlington Hotel in Hot Springs, which is the oldest and largest hotel in the state. But with it being in the historic district, they have, if they make changes to it, they have to spend a lot more money on it than you would if you just went out and built a new hotel. But it was it's a program that has proven to work. It's something that Ronald Reagan spoke very highly about, and the things he said about it back in the 1980s have proven to come to fruition even more than I think what he probably realized. So it was nice to have a YouTube video of President Reagan to go around and show Kevin Brady and the speaker and whoever else would look at it that, hey, this is a program that our friend Ronald Reagan helped put into place and that has proven to work well, and I think we should leave it alone. And at the end of the day, that's what we did.
Absolutely, and President Reagan, pretty sharp fellow. Let me ask you, the fact that the Democrats didn't want to get on board with lowering taxes for, gosh, I guess the overwhelming majority of Americans. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi even said it was crumbs. I'm hoping that somebody will use that in political advertisements this fall when folks are running against Democrats in the House and the Senate, for that matter.
Yeah, I don't see how they would keep from using it. I mean, there were Democrats got a goose egg. Not one single Democrat crossed over and voted for the tax bill, and they continue to bash it when people are seeing the benefits of it, and we're seeing the economy continue to grow and businesses growing, and they're still out there bashing it, calling it crumbs, calling it a nothing burger. I've heard every kind of expression you can imagine, and I'm saying you must think the American voters are really ignorant if they're not seeing, if you want to keep talking about that while they're actually physically seeing the benefits of the tax bill, and they'll continue to see the benefits of it.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't realize they're still bashing it once people are seeing it in their paychecks. But that's great. You know, when your opponent is self-destructing, you definitely don't want to get in the way.
Not just give them a little more rope.
That's amazing. Let me ask you. Last week, both houses of Congress, majority Republicans and majority Democrats, voted for this $1.3 trillion spending bill, which continues to fund Planned Parenthood, sanctuary cities, Obamacare, has some pretty scary gun control stuff in there with a fixed NICS. And if I understand correctly, what's being reported is it forbids the president from building the wall he's been promising to build. And you were the one member of the House of Representatives from Arkansas to vote against it. Of course, Tom Cotton in the Senate voted against it. What went through obviously you only had, I think, 17 hours to look at a 2,200-page bill. What went through your mind as you were determining whether to vote pro or con?
Well, I've got a track record. I've not voted for an omnibus yet, being in Congress, so I'm very skeptical of omnibuses. I know they sidestep the process. And the fact that this one was, I think, published around 10 o'clock at night, or maybe 8 o'clock at night, it was 10 o'clock before I was able to get a copy of it.
Yeah.
And then we voted on it around noon the next day. And I've seen a figure since then that if you started reading the second it was posted and read all the way until the time of the vote, you'd had to have read 132 pages per hour nonstop to get through the bill. And the way these bills are written, you can't just read the text. You got to look at the code that they're changing. So, right off the bat, I can't go vote for something that I really don't know what all's in it. Now, there were summaries published, but then the fact that, it was going to increase the deficit $1 trillion, and I went to Congress to try to get some fiscal sanity there to reduce the debt.
Yeah.
Debt is a tax on future generations. You can try to put lipstick on it or whatever you want to do, but when we incur debt now, public debt, the only way that's going to be paid off is with taxes, and it's going to be taxes on those in the future. So I didn't want to do that to my kids and grandkids or the kids and grandkids of the 4th District or the country. But then, I was in a meeting this morning with some folks that provide foster care up in Charleston and at Chaffee Crossing there near Fort Smith.
Yeah.
And they found out there was a provision in the bill that's likely going to shut their foster care facilities down. And these are, or else they'll have to go hire nurses and meet all these federal regulations that are really aimed at getting to being able to provide the great foster care that they're providing there. So, that's another reinforcement to me that I did the right thing voting against this bill. But, when you're talking about something as important as the federal government, when there's a lot of things that are unknown about it, and the things I did know were that there were senators working to put stuff in the bill at the nth hour. They had to have 9 Democratic votes even to bring the bill up, and I know how Senate Democrats operate, that to get their vote, they had to get something in return.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure there's any one person out there that knows everything that was in that bill, but we'll see it in the days and the weeks to come forward, just what all was in it. And, Doc, I've been working on forestry legislation since I got in Congress.
Yeah.
And passed a bill out of the House twice to address the mismanagement of the forest and the wildfire issues out west.
Right.
Well, they ended up putting a lot of my forestry bill in this bill.
Oh,
and,
so there is a little silver lining there.
Well, yeah, except I voted against something I've been working on for nearly 3 years.
Good grief. Did anybody even tell you, by the way, Representative Westerman, you might want to check page 1783 because we threw you a bone?
Oh, yeah, I got a...
okay.
And I knew this was going to be in there.
Okay.
They were talking with me about we're going to put it in, but, I got a call from the Speaker. I got a call from policy people at the White House trying to talk me into voting for it, and I said, I can't do that. There's good stuff in the bill. The funding for the military, I had already voted for that, I think, 4 times.
Yeah.
But that's just not the way to do it. And I don't know how to change the process if I go along with the process that's a bad one.
Yeah, no question about it. We're speaking with United States Representative Bruce Westerman. He represents the 4th District of Arkansas. That's southern Arkansas, western Arkansas, and a good little chunk of northwestern Arkansas. Up for re-election, Republican primary is May 22nd. More coming up with Representative Bruce Westerman in mere moments as the Doc Washburn Show continues on your news, traffic, and weather station, News Radio 102.9 KARN. All right, we're talking to United States Representative Bruce Westerman, and he represents the 4th District of Arkansas in the U.S. House of Representatives. 4th District is southern Arkansas, western Arkansas, and a good chunk of northwestern Arkansas. And Representative Westerman, we were talking before the break about how frustrating it was for you. You've been working on forestry issues since you first got elected to Congress about 3.5 years ago. And in an attempt to get you to vote for a 2,200-page bill that no one had had a chance to read, you were told, hey, by the way, Bruce, we put your forestry stuff. We just stuck it right in the middle of this monstrosity of a 1.3 trillion budget-busting bill that we know you don't want to vote for. Now, I know that some conversations are I'm sure confidential, and I don't want to ask you to break any confidences, but what I'm hearing is they always do it this way. They always wait to the last minute, and then they put together a 2,000-page bill and hold the gun to everybody's head and say, you better vote for this.
Yeah.
What are the prospects for changing that process?
Yeah, let me clarify, too. I knew the forestry legislation was going to be in the bill. I knew that was on the table. They were looking at putting it in there. They were, as Senate Democrats were trying to weaken it and make it something else, they were asking me as Are these acceptable reforms? So I was well aware the forestry legislation was going to be in the bill.
Right, but
now,
you just didn't get to read the rest of the bill.
Right, and that's why it was like, yeah, that's good. I knew some of the defense stuff that was going to be in there, but don't.
And that's
throw
good.
This 2,200-page bill on me at the last minute and expect me to vote for it. So we've got to get back to what's called regular order.
Right.
And the irony here, Doc, is the House did that. Last year we passed a budget. We passed 12 appropriation bills. We put them in a package. We sent them over to the Senate. They had all of that before September 30th, before the fiscal year ended and the new one started.
Yeah.
They've yet to take up one of those bills. And they know because of this 60-vote rule, the Senate Democrats know that they can hold out. They can get in these crisis situations where there's going to be a shutdown or a continuing resolution. And for the Senate to get their 9 votes or however many it takes to get cloture over there, they can get all kinds of stuff added into it. And it's not the right way to do business. And I'm not a total opponent of cloture. And the filibuster, it has its place. It was put in place to help protect the minority. It even goes back to the roots of our electoral college system, where the House all the people are represented in the House, the states are represented in the Senate, and you give a voice to the minority. But it's being misused to kill the appropriations process and hold the funding process hostage, when I don't think it was ever meant for that, because we're constitutionally dictated to fund the government as Congress. And when they will not even bring an appropriation bill up for a hearing, something is broken with the process.
Something is broken, but as long as the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, Republican, is intransigent, steadfast and immovable on this thing, I don't know what the rest of us, including all you guys in the House who hate all this spending, can do.
Well, there's one thing I can do. I've got 1 out of 435 votes, and I want to put that vote where I believe my constituents in the 4th District want that vote.
Right.
And I can be a voice, just like right now, talking about how broken the process is. And I don't want to just talk about it. I want to work to change the process. And, I'm on the Budget Committee, and it starts with budget process reform, which I've offered a lot of ideas there. There's a question whether we'll even pass a budget out of the House this year, which is the first step in doing the spending bills.
Right.
And the reason we're questioning whether there will be a budget passed out is because the Senate has basically said they're not doing a budget this year.
Wow.
But I'm a member of the Republican Study Committee on the steering team of that, and we've proposed our own budget. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until we get this change, because our future depends on it.
Absolutely. We can't keep doing this because eventually the House of Cards falls down. United States Representative Bruce Westerman, representing the 4th District of Arkansas, that's southern Arkansas, western Arkansas, and a pretty good chunk of northwestern Arkansas. We appreciate you coming to the program with us, but more important, we appreciate you voting against that $1.3 trillion spending monstrosity last week. Thank you very much. God bless you. Y'all come see us.
Thank you, Doc. Have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, coming up, we got to talk about what happened over the weekend in Washington and Little Rock and all over the country. March for our lives? Nah, I don't think so. More like March against our rights. And that's next. Against our rights. And that's next. Against our rights. And that's next.